Hello and welcome to the Absolute Beginner's Guide to Sketchbook Pro. I'm going to do a little bit of a navigational walkthrough for you. I'm going to show you how to set up your sheet, how to change resolutions, where all the tools are that you need to know. This is for the absolute beginner with Sketchbook Pro. If you're a traditional artist and you sketch on paper and you're thinking, hey, I want to get into doing some digital art, this is going to be a great tool for you. It's very affordable. It's very robust. I use it for some of my professional level drawings, as you can see on some of my other images and videos on YouTube here. So without any delay, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I want to mention is that you should not be using a mouse and keyboard. Well, you use the keyboard, but you don't want to just use, this isn't a mouse kind of a situation. What you need to do is go out and get yourself a Wacom Intuos Pro, or there's also the Wacom Bamboo and Graphire. Some of these they're only about $80, and I know that might seem like a lot, but considering that the professional grade Wacom tablets go up into the close to $400, it's actually a pretty good deal, and it's a great beginner's tablet, the Bamboo. I personally use the Wacom Intuos Pro, which you can also get on Amazon or directly from Wacom. What a Wacom tablet does is it allows you to use a pen-like interface with pressure sensitivity, so that the harder you press, you'll get different results based on a thicker line or more opacity. And I'll explain a little bit more about what that means as we go. Okay, now that's out of the way. Let's go ahead and let's get started. But one thing I want to mention before we do, have fun with it, man. Just have fun with it. Don't stress out. This isn't a test. You're not going to be graded. You're not going to fail the class or whatever. Have fun with it. That's going to be the most important thing that you do before you do anything with these tools. It can be frustrating at times. Don't let that stop you, man. It's going to be a lot of fun once you figure it out. All right, let's dig into the interface itself of Sketchbook Pro. First of all, you've got your obvious tools off to the left, and that's going to be your pencils and brushes and all the different airbrushes, and you'll get different results with each one, and I encourage you to try them out. These are erasers, so and they have different properties as well. These are kind of just presets. Of course, you can edit them later, and I'll show you how to do all that as we progress. Some of these custom ones have a really nice noise to them, and this is really kind of what I love about Sketchbook Pro is all the noisy kind of textury brushes that get these cool blending algorithms, and then of course you got some spatters. There are more as well, and I'll show you how to edit them a little bit further on in the video. Down here you have a quick access wheel which allows you to pull up some different tools. I'm going to go over a little bit of that. This button right here is going to allow you to decide if you want this over on the right side, if you want it up in the top right corner. I kind of like it down in the bottom left. That's where it sits pretty down there. It's a nice cozy spot for it. Here you've got some tools such as the ruler, and the ruler is kind of a nifty thing, and we can actually go in and actually start drawing a little bit with this. I'm going to switch my colors to black here so that I can get a nice solid line that you can see. And the ruler is neat because you can just kind of get a perfect line, and it works the way that you would expect a ruler to work, you know? Kind of allows you it lays down a guide that'll create the line that you're trying to get. The next thing is, of course, you have ellipses. You can set your image to fit to the whole screen. The symmetry is pretty nifty. The cool thing about symmetry is you can just paint on one side, and it mirrors it over to the other side. So if you're painting a face, this comes in super handy. You know, here's the nose, and it's kind of neat when you start to, you can jump to either side also, by the way. I've used this for a few portraits and things that I've done, and this is by no means a super fancy drawing. I'm just playing around with the symmetry tool, and you can see how much time that saves. Otherwise, you'd have to create a copy and duplicate that copy over. So this saves a ton of time. You can move, of course, the center of the of that around to get different. If you wanted to move it, rotate it, you can also flip it vertically, or you can do quarters. This one's if you're painting like mandalas or something. I don't know what. We're not going to save that in. You get some pretty neat results playing around with these, and I don't want to spend too much time on that, but it's a lot of fun to play around with. Other tools that we've got, this will allow you to do some zooming, but I'm going to show you a quicker way to play around with zooming. Um, this is the I don't know what it's actually called, but it's activated through the space bar. So rather than go through the menu, you might want to just hit the space bar and hold that down and drag right and left, and you'll see how you can adjust the zooming on your canvas. You can also highlight the rotation and turn your image. This is particularly handy when you get to be a little bit more advanced with this tool, and you'll want to rotate the angle of your hand on the tablet so that you don't have to move the tablet around. You just move the canvas in the software around, and you'll if you try it, you'll see what I mean. It's a nice feeling to when you're curving your wrist to not have to worry too much about whether or not you're going to get that awkward angle. And then of course there's the bottom one, the outside ring is just to move the overall canvas around wherever you want it, which is kind of handy. But really neat when you want to zoom in an awful lot here. Just hold that down and then drag right and left. That kind of covers the tools. Of course, we've seen the ellipse also allows you to draw a little guide, and you can draw through it. It's really as if there's like a plastic or a metal ellipse that's been laid down, and you can choose to kind of like draw along that edge. Creates a little guide for you. Pretty handy stuff, especially if you're doing word balloons and that sort of a thing. Next up, this is just a shortcut to some of your more popular brushes that you might be using. You can drag out to each one that you might use, and you can change these out, of course. But that's a little bit more of a advanced technique that we're not going to deal with right away. We'll deal with that much later. So the next thing we've got is, of course, colors, and these are just your basic colors. I personally prefer to use the color wheel over here as my color picker. Although when you're actually painting, one thing that you'll notice, and I'm going to cover a quick key here, the Option key if you're on a Mac, or it's the Alt key if you're on Windows, it pulls up a little eyedropper which allows you to select that color. So if I wanted the white, I'd move it over the white, I'd hold down that key, Option or Alt key, and I would select the color that I wanted. Now that's especially useful when you start to do things like blending with two colors. Oh, these are markers, so they're doing a weird effect. Let me use something else there. You see how you're getting some neat color blending. Now, the color that happens in between from the blending, maybe you want that color or that color. See how this up here indicates what color you're actually selecting. And of course you can increase saturation here by selecting this. On the right side shows the new color, and on the left is the old color. This is great if you want to like, see, color is a very relative thing, and this is why this tool is particularly robust, because it shows you the relativity of the colors that you have versus the new color that you're picking. And so this is particularly an oil brush, which gets you a little bit more smudgy kind of colors. We'll go over that in a second when I dig into the different brushes a little bit more. Down here, we've also got selection tools, the lasso. So what's neat about that is that you can, of course, select something, and then if you were going to paint over, into that zone, it only paints in the area that's selected. It only affects the area that you have selected. You can clear that area that is selected, of course. Move or rotate the object. So let's see, I have that. So it pulls up another wheel, which gives you these different options. This allows you to resize your selection. This allows you to rotate your selection. This allows you to just move it around, of course. Um, Many of these tools are also available up here, you'll notice. So this is mostly selecting and altering content that you have in your image. This window, or this one right here, is a quick key to save. This is file management type stuff. So pretty obvious stuff, but you could also just hit Command or Control S will save your image, and you want to save with a good amount of frequency. Another thing that I want to mention while we're here, undo. Now there's this button right here which allows you to undo and redo. I tend to just use Command or Control Z. There's a button on your keyboard, Command if you're on a Mac, it's Control on a Windows operating system. Command Z allows you to just quickly back it up, which is kind of handy, kind of nifty stuff. So that covers the wheel down here for the most part. Another thing I want to cover while we're on the subject of our tools and setting up our canvas and things of that nature, I want to cover the sizing, the image size. So one of the biggest questions that people ask me is, what size should I be working? And ironically enough, with Sketchbook Pro, they start you out at a very good size to start out with. About 3,300 pixels wide is pretty standard, pretty good stuff. You can, of course, change that, and it'll alter the image itself. I tend to do this at 300 dpi, pixels per inch. But that makes the image, of course, massive, so we don't need to do that. That's a relative thing. What really matters is the actual pixel dimensions of your image, not the resolution necessarily. But if you're going to set something up for print, you're going to want this at 300 dpi and like 3,500 wide, roughly, something of this nature. And then it'll just adjust your canvas. You'll notice if things get down into tiny little pixels, and let's just go ahead and play around with that. Let's switch this to percent, and let's say it's 10%. You see what that did is it created, you can actually see the pixels. Sketchbook Pro doesn't handle pixel painting particularly well. It tends to generally blur out things and smooth things over. It's really, you have to think of Sketchbook Pro as more of a sketching tool in that regard, and you're not going to get into precise pixel painting. Moving on, let's talk briefly about some of the brushes, and if you want to play around with brushes the way that I am, I would suggest opening up this button right here. Will actually open that window that you see, the brush properties on the right side. That's going to allow you to adjust things like the hardness of your brush. Each brush is going to have different qualities. First of all, I'm painting with white, so make sure that you're painting over with a color that will show up on the canvas. There are a number of ways to adjust the size and hardness of the brush, one of which is to use that slider, the other of which is to use the bracket keys on your keyboard. And there's the left bracket, which is, it's under your delete key or your plus and minus key in the after the numbers, and that will allow you to, you can see as I'm holding it down, it adjusts this slider on its own without me adjusting it. And that allows you to, at its hardest, when you're pressing the hardest, it will be the most large, the most dense or the thickest brush, so to speak. Different brushes allow you to do different things. This is why the presets are really nifty, because they allow you to play around with as you saw earlier, I was using like a marker kind of a thing. This does an interesting multiply kind of a feature that is different than the way if I were using oil, for instance, and I used black like I just did. But then if I use that same yellow on top of that black, it does a totally different blending. Do you see? So I really want to encourage you to find some brushes that you particularly like, and that you understand, that are relatable to you, to be able to blend and to be able to get the expression that you want. The first time that you sit down with Sketchbook Pro, man, look at what I'm drawing. This is not like some crazy advanced painting. This is just me like kind of doodling around with the tools. I'm not even using like really much in terms of like color selecting or anything of that nature. I'm really just playing around with all the different tools. And that's, you shouldn't expect a lot from yourself with your first foray into the toolkit. I'll do something kind of a little bit prettier for the sake of showing you how robust the program is later in the video. But for now, yeah, let's move on a little bit. Oh, this one's one of my favorites. I love this one when I am not painting with white, because it feels so like very much like a natural, like a brush, like a very fine brush. The one that I use a lot is this number 4. No, it's not that one. I have used that one a lot, but this one right here. Nope, a little smaller. I use this one a lot. I use the number 1 through 4 actually. You get a very nice, very organic looking pencil line from that. And that's really kind of where Sketchbook Pro shines. Sketchbook Pro shines with its line or very sketchy line art kind of features. It feels like you're working with graphite, you know? Let me get that a little bit darker actually. Ooh, too large. It starts to feel like you're working with actual graphite, and you see even I'm kind of dancing around like, which one do I want to use for this effect? So like, there's no right or wrong answer for these, you know. That's kind of the awesome thing about digital art, is that you are totally free to play around, try different things. If something doesn't work, you do it, back it up, just go back to undo, or do it a different way on another layer. Speaking of which, that's a great segue. Let's talk about layers. How do layers work? If you can imagine it like a transparency, like say that I've drawn this character in, I've drawn in this face, and it's good that I've drawn this up to this point. I don't like this big ugly yellow thing I got going up here. So I just selected white. Another way to do that would be to use the eraser. Let's just use the tools as they're intended. This is a hard square eraser, and this is more of a soft blendy eraser, and you can see the difference there in what kind of results you get. And you can of course adjust how hard that edge is as well here in all the options in your brush properties. But let's talk about layers. Um, Now, say that I want to colorize this, and I've got my line art, and that's on. We have our background layer here, which is it's visible and it's just white. We can actually change that if we wanted to, but we're not going to do that because we have some white that we painted in. And then we're gonna. This is our layer that has our line art on it. We can adjust the opacity, and opacity is how much transparency is on that layer. How much of what is underneath it do you see? You can also lock this layer, and that can also be very handy as well. There are a few other layer options that you have here, but I don't want to confuse you too much. I don't want to confuse you. But we're going to take our line art layer and we're going to set that to multiply. Now what that does is, well, let's switch it back to normal first. Now you'll notice that when I had switched my background color, let's say that the color behind it is kind of this, let's do like a grayish, and let's actually paint it in with something like a little bit larger, like an airbrush thing, and we want to increase the flow so we get a lot of it. We want a lot of that color from our airbrush. We're going to paint. Oops, we're painting on our line art. Okay, we're going to paint on our oh, we might need to create a new layer actually. Let's do that. Let's create a new layer, and let's drag our line art on top of the new layer. So Make sure that your line art is on top of this new layer 3, and the way to drag it is this button right here allows you to switch the order. Okay, so we're going to paint underneath our line art. And that's why there's the visual stack. Now you'll notice there's this white right here. Why is that white showing up like that? And the white is showing up because there's white on this layer. I had painted with the color white on that layer. And that is it is at full opacity, so it blocks it out. But if we set this to multiply, if we set our line art to multiply, all of our black shows up transparently, or on top of it, compounds, it multiplies onto the layer below it. So down here we're painting with our weird blue skinned guy. We're going to change that. Let's just go ahead and change it now. A good flesh color I found is right here around the orangish pink, kind of, yeah. So actually, skin does have a little bit of blue in it, so that kind of works out pretty well. Let's just go ahead and increase our brush size. And we're doing a very soft airbrush kind of an effect here. And I'm not going to do, if you want to see like how to paint, I highly recommend checking out some of my other videos that are a little bit more advanced. For this, we're really just focusing on the tools for Sketchbook Pro, and I don't want to get into, hey, here's how you make a pretty drawing of a face. I just want to teach you some basics of colorizing your line art. Another thing that you can do is, of course, remember I was showing you about the selection tool. You can create a selection of, for instance, the eye. And our eye is solid black, so if we were to paint on this layer underneath, you wouldn't see it. I'll show you what I mean. Actually, yeah, let's go ahead and paint that in. You won't see anything because it's on the layer underneath. But if we paint on the layer above, you see, it shows up because this layer is set to multiply. This is our line art. What was there before was black. Now I just painted in a little bit of color. And that's why you get this more bright kind of a thing. And most of what I do actually is, I don't really play around a lot with selections as much with Sketchbook Pro. I do a lot with just the brushes, just the pens. But when I want to actually get into painting out my face a little bit more, what I'll do is I'll go down to that layer that's my actual coloring layer, and I start to airbrush that in. And it's totally going to preserve my line art because it's on a multiply layer. I'm not even affecting the line art until I switch to this. Now there are a number of different effects that you can get, different, and let's play around with those a little bit. Let's say that I want to, you'll notice now I created a new layer, and that's on top of my line art layer. And of course that's going to have transparency. So I can actually adjust how much of the opacity it has. And I can actually play around with, maybe I want it to color burn a little bit to really boost up that saturation of my reds. Or maybe I want a linear burn, and I don't want to go into exactly how all of these work. I encourage you to sort of play around and figure them out for what works for what you need. It's more of an advanced technique, and I don't want to confuse you or frustrate you. But it is pretty robust, and it does allow you to, as you begin to get more comfortable with the software, you will begin to find that there are a lot of different, very professional level techniques that you can do with Sketchbook Pro, which is kind of what makes it so damn amazing. That it's so versatile. It's great for beginners because essentially it's a digital sketch pad. It is a digital sketch pad that you can do a lot more with as you progress, as you develop as an artist, as you advance in skill. This will take you all the way from beginner to intermediate, and there are some pros that never stop using Sketchbook Pro, myself included. I've done several images. I want to encourage you to check out How to Draw Your Dragon. Is a video that I did here on YouTube and in my Gumroad box set of tutorials. Almost everything that I do can also be done in Sketchbook Pro, and that's kind of what makes it so damn awesome. Um, and then of course you see I just painted all that in kind of dark, my shadows, and then I just backen it off a little bit. The other nice thing is you can go in and you can start to erase out just that effect if you wanted to as well, or just that layer of content. When it gets really fun, oh boy, I'm gonna get carried away, guys. This always happens. When you start to get into the texture brushes and you start to apply, this is on a new layer, so you see I can back that off just a little bit if I want. And now I'm just painting. If this layer is only at 50% opacity, maybe 55% opacity, and I'm just barely kind of adding a little bit of texture to it, a little bit of that, a little bit of this brush down here. This is I don't know what it's called actually. It's just one of the preset texture brushes, and that gets you this really nice grainy, natural grainy look. And so that kind of covers all of the basic tools. That's like your introduction to Sketchbook Pro. What I've done is like I did it. I went ahead and I got carried away, and I just started jamming. I wanted to kind of just finish out this drawing of this character's face, and so I'm applying essentially all of the things that I had just talked about and explained how to do. I've sped it up a lot, of course. And I think I maybe spent like 20, maybe 25 minutes just kind of doing this little portrait of this character. And probably the only things that I didn't get to cover were cropping, which is if you go into edit, there is a pull down to be able to crop, or there's actually in the menu at the very top, you can see a black square with a line through it, and that allows you to crop your image to reframe the edging, which is really handy if you just want to change their proportions or add a little bit of extra area to the bottom or the side or something of that nature. And I went into image and adjustments to do some coloration. But other than that, mostly, yeah, everything that I did for the rest of this piece, I explained how to do from the first part of the video. There was another part where I had gone in several times and created a lighten layer. And ultimately, in the very end of the video, I do a blur across the whole thing. But other than that, that's pretty much it. Flipping layers. I could have used a mirror effect for that, which I did talk about how to do that. And then mostly that's it, dudes. The most important thing that I want to emphasize to you is don't compare what you do to what you're seeing me do here. I really want to encourage you to go at your own speed. One thing about learning to draw and getting better at drawing is very similar to, and I've related it to this several times, it's similar to exercise and working out at the gym. And what I mean by that is that sometimes you're watching an exercise video and it's a really intense workout, and these guys are in great shape. They got six packs, and they're like, "Yeah, just do 300 of these reps or something." And you're like, "Come on, dude, I can't keep up with that." Just do it, scale it back, do it at your pace. If you walk away from the whole experience with a greater understanding of the tools, then that's perfect. That's exactly what you wanted to accomplish. You don't get a six pack going to the gym once. Mm-mm, that ain't how it works. Only compare yourself to where you were yesterday. Don't get yourself frustrated trying to accomplish what professionals do right out of the box. Now, if you really want to improve, if you feel like you're beyond the level of where this video is, this is, as I said before, very beginner's tutorial video. If you're ready for the next level, check out a lot of my other videos. I do a lot of intermediate to professional level uh, tips and tricks and tactics that'll help you to speed up and things to think about while you're painting. all those things are covered in my box set of tutorials as well over on Gumroad. And if you're jamming with Sketchbook Pro and you've got yourself like your own YouTube channel, or you have some of your own artwork that you've done with Sketchbook Pro, throw that stuff up, man. Let me see a link. I would love to check it out. I'd love to see what you do with it. I love the community here. I love seeing how other artists are growing, and every now and then I'll do a little search for my name and I see somebody who had a really strong takeaway, and they recorded their own process, and it's just a real joy for me to see how well it's impacted and helped others improve their craft, or just got them drawing again. I get letters all the time from people basically just telling me, hey, I put down drawing for a long time. Your channel got me started up again. That's awesome. I love hearing that stuff. If you want more free tutorials and you want to be just involved in the conversation, if you got any questions, please drop them in the comments below. Please subscribe and share this video around with anyone that you know that might be interested in picking up some digital drawing techniques. I know a lot of comic book artists that from back in the day that I used to know. They see what I'm doing now and they're like, how did you transition? Well, just watch my videos, man. Watch my channel. That's the whole reason I do it. Anyway, I'm helping every way I can to push the digital art movement forward, and I appreciate your support. You guys are awesome, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Ciao, ciao, baby. Oh yeah.